want to thank everybody for joining us today. We're going to be talking about our well-researched, loved, and talked about topic of OTCs, and in particular, the AirPod craze, I guess, and the job that Apple's doing with their technology. So want to welcome everybody. Just a quick housekeeping before we start. If you have any questions along the way, you can drop them in the Q&A, and then we will have time at the end that we can go through those and answer any questions that come up. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So just want to kick it off with really what we're talking about today, what the objectives of the meeting are, and what really the takeaways that I want you to have from this. So we're going to look at the current state of over-the-counter devices and AirPods that have the hearing aid feature, look at how we can combat the OTC noise that's out there by dispelling common patient misconceptions. Our patients come in with, preconceived notions a lot when they've looked at things online. So we want to talk about how we can really combat those misconceptions. And then I want you to be equipped with strategies to really reframe the conversations with your patients so that you can position yourself as the expert and talk about the things that are most relevant to the situation. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time. We'll do a very brief OTC overview, very basic. We all know, based on the FDA regulations, they address mild to moderate hearing loss only, nothing more severe than that. There's really no hearing test required, even though some of the over-the-counter aids, including the AirPods, do have a hearing evaluation feature built into them. And then all of them are typically self-driven fitting, or they come pre-programmed. So just real basic technology that is out there for patients. So when you start to talk to patients about the differences, or when they start to ask questions about the differences in over-the-counter hearing aids versus prescription hearing aids, there is a multitude of information out there on the internet that gives patients these comparisons, right? I gave you, 8 or 10 infographics there that were just readily available when you do a Google search comparing OTCs to hearing aids. So patients have at their fingertips the ability to gather this information, come in equipped, and know the questions that they're really asking. So just knowing that these things are out there. Obviously, if you want some sort of an infographic or something, we can generate that. But just having the information to be able to have the talking points, I think, is the most important piece. So basis for OTCs, I really want to dive into the AirPod piece, right? Because it's the newest wave of OTC on the market, and Apple, as we all know, does a really good job at advertisement. So, and brand and market awareness, right? So we've all seen the advertisement that came out at Christmas of the little girl unwrapping her guitar and the dad sitting on the couch, not being able to hear her play until he switched on his hearing aid feature, in his AirPod, which is odd that he was just randomly sitting on the couch on Christmas Eve with his AirPods in, right? But again, very touching advertisement, and really pulled at the heartstrings and the emotional piece of hearing loss. So AirPods as hearing aids, obviously they have the hearing assistance feature that includes media assist and conversation boost. We're all pretty familiar with conversation boost because that's available in most of the hearing aids that we are connecting through Bluetooth. But the media assist essentially allows for the amplification feature to be applied when listening to videos, music, anything that you're streaming through the device, through the phone. Um, excuse me. You have basic directional microphones and amplification. However, the technology is based on the hearing loss. So, like I said, you would go through and do a hearing test. I'll show you that in just a second. But basic directional microphones. And then, of course, the limitation is it's iPhone only because we're talking about AirPods. And then we'll get into the actual visual feature in a minute. So just diving in a little bit to the AirPod hearing aid feature. I took a couple of these screenshots from their website, but this is essentially what the patient is going to see. And if you have gone through this process, what you will see is step one, downloading the app to activate the feature or accessing it through the health app. The first thing you're going to do is have the hearing test when you're doing the hearing test. And so the results of the hearing test essentially determine if you're able to access the hearing aid feature or the amplification feature or not. The concern, just my personal concern, I would think most of our concerns with this is that there isn't really any regulation to that. So I'll talk about a review here in a minute, but if you go through the evaluation process, and the actual evaluation is that second screenshot there, what it looks like. So it plays tones, just like we would play tones in a booth. It plays tones and you tap the screen when you hear the tone. And so it ranges from, intensity and frequency to then plot out the actual audiogram of the patient on that last image there on the right. And it quantifies the hearing loss as to mild, moderate, severe, etc. If you go through the evaluation and the hearing loss that is measured is not severe enough to quantify as a mild or moderate loss, you can then retake the test and do worse on it, deliberately do worse on it so that you can then access the amplification. So a little bit of a concern there for me, in that the patient can then manipulate the results in order to access the feature. So positive features of OTCs, because there definitely are some positive features of this OTC and AirPod phase. Obviously, it's going to amplify sound for certain environments, not really appropriate for all environments, and that's where the limitations lie. They offer an entry level point for people who may be just on the fence, don't really feel like they need hearing aids yet, that gateway to the technology. It's going to bridge the gap from tech to medical device. So it really is starting to close that gap. We talk a lot about the gap between where patients are and where we desire them to be. It serves as a little bridge of that gap from the technology that they may currently already have in their ears to what they're eventually going to need or what they currently need now. And then there's certainly a convenience factor to it. So if they live in a rural area, if there's a time constraint or anything of that nature, it prevents the requirement of attending an office visit, multiple office visits, things like that. But ultimately, all that being said, the biggest positive of these devices is that it's increasing awareness. So increasing awareness of hearing healthcare, the early difficulties that patients might be exposed to or might be experiencing as they, are present in difficult listening situations, things like that. We need to view it as an increase of awareness. This is a big area where we tend to focus on a lot, right? This is where we spend most of our time focusing on that gap between the need and ability, the limitations and differences we see between the devices. So obviously there's no custom fitting essentially through, a person, a live person, in, one-on-one engagement. There's no real ear measurement. There's no professional counseling involved with it, unless, maybe an online type feature. a lot of these devices, and this is what I continually hear from professionals as well as patients, is there's really poor background noise performance. I can accept that wholeheartedly because it is the one area where we combat with traditional hearing aids, right? That's where people have the most difficulty. If you're having the most difficulty without amplification in those areas, it's likely where you're still going to have the most difficulty, just not as much is what we're going for. So these really have not great performance, and that's for OTCs or AirPods, not great performance in background noise. They're definitely not designed for progressive or complex hearing losses, very poor battery life, and then the technology for impact noise regulation, and this is an area where I really have a lot of concern, is the aspect for impact noise regulation. Obviously, there's not going to be significant output from these devices, but how do we truly know that? And what is the impact noise reduction and regulation in these? For the AirPods in particular, there is a manual feature that has to be activated for that impact noise reduction. So another concern and area of shortcoming for the devices. So found this really interesting article. I know when I was in practice, a lot of patients, in the over 65 range, a lot of patients would bring up AARP information, whether or not they have insurance through AARP or they are a member of AARP. That group age range, AARP does, much like Apple, does a really good job marketing to their core customer. So I would have patients frequently bring up AARP recommendations. So I thought this was really important to include in the presentation. So AARP, one of their editors, did a review of the AirPods, and what he found was that it was very hard to complete the evaluations. So the reason for that being was because of the background noise level where he was trying to take the test. And so he moved multiple locations and really was not able to complete the evaluation until he got like at his home in a closet with the door closed and just absolutely no noise. It was just complete silence whatsoever. And he even mentioned in the article that just the noise of the lights, we know the fluorescent light hum can be problematic sometimes. Even the noise of the lights gave an error message that the surroundings were too loud. Secondly, and going back to that evaluation, he actually made a comment that the first test that he took did not qualify him for the amplification. So he went back and took it again and worsened his results in order to activate it. There's no support, obviously, for tech issues, sound quality issues. You're really on your own for this. There's always this stigma of devices in the ears. So he made the comment that, can you really even be sure that a person that's wearing them is listening to you and not listening to music? And then, of course, low battery life. So with the amplification activated, he got about 6 hours of battery life out of the devices before they had to be fully charged again. So battery life's always a concern. So how can we really reframe the conversation? Where can we take this with our patients? So it really all begins with our mindset, right? So to bring this home, I'm going to tell a quick little story. Everyone knows the website Zillow, I'm sure, on the call. If you don't, I highly encourage you to look it up. But how could over-the-counter hearing aids even remotely relate to Zillow? Zillow website has 10 billion views per year at this point. It really blew up during the pandemic when we were all sitting around at home, twiddling our thumbs, waiting to go back to work. But 10 billion views puts it in the same ballpark as Instagram or TikTok. The average home listed on Zillow for sale gets like 1,000 views, right? So much more than what you would get on a standard real estate website. But ultimately, it became the newest, hottest gossip column on the block. Everyone's looking at Zillow. Everyone is researching their house on Zillow. Everyone's looking at their neighbor's house on Zillow. And it totally has disrupted the landscape of real estate, much like OTCs and AirPods have disrupted our landscape, right? Or at least our mindset of our landscape and our profession. Ultimately, though, what Zillow has done is created education and transparency for the real estate market. Before Zillow came along, it was really a taboo subject to ask people how much they paid for their house, or to know how much people paid for their house, or to see the inside of your neighbor's house, right? Without going. It really was not something that was readily talked about. Now you wouldn't even consider going to look at a house without looking it up on Zillow to see how much they paid for it, how much it's truly worth. What am I looking at? What's it gonna look like when I get there? Is it even worth my time? That was a thing, was not a thing 20 years ago, right? Much like OTCs and AirPods, but now it is. So if you take a step back and look at it, this is really a parallel situation. We haven't gotten rid of people like Crylike and Century 21 and Remax. All of those companies are still very active. I see their signs all over. They're still very much are real estate agents that are making significant impacts in the selling and purchasing of houses. All of this just proves that the underlying point and the underlying need is information. Information and education is key, because ultimately arming yourself with information and knowledge, doing your research, allows the patient to be less skeptical and more relaxed about the information that you're going to provide to them. So it really is all based on mindset and how we embrace this new era. Because as we talked about a couple of weeks ago in a call, there's going to be another disruptor that comes along. There's going to be something else that comes out that upheaves the industry and gets everyone talking. It happens over and over and over. The way we approach it and the way we embrace it and essentially wrap our mind around it and our mindset looking at it is really the key takeaway in how we're going to be successful with whatever that disruptor is in this point, OTCs and AirPods. So just like Zillow changed how we approach real estate, AirPods and OTC expansion could change the way we look at our industry and the way we talk about hearing aids, and really tap into those people, that younger generation, and those people in that 1 to 7 year range that, we know statistics have told us that it usually takes patients about 7 years before they ever walk in our office. This could be a way that we can tap into that at a younger age and really get these people aware of what's happening. So how can we reframe the conversation with our patients? We want to focus on educating and informing. You can use the eyeglass versus reading glass analogy. You can use the Zillow versus real estate company analogy. There's all kinds of relational stories that you can make. But it really is an impact of education. We can address hearing aids as a function of the brain, not just volume and amplification, but how it's impacting our brain function. We can focus a lot on comorbidities. We talk about those a lot, and the effects of untreated hearing loss and the effect that has on other functions of our body, especially our brain function and dementia. And then really identify desired outcomes for your patient. And this is where you want to have a holistic conversation with them about what their desired outcome is, but really how your expertise and your solutions can meet that. So the big question that I have for you in addressing all these patient misconceptions and how, reframing the conversation is, have you really listened? Have you taken the time to acquire one of these OTC devices? Have you taken the time to and really listen with them? Spend some time in difficult listening situations. Have you activated the hearing feature in the AirPods and listened to how it sounds and gone out to dinner with them in your ears? Because being able to provide that firsthand real world experience for the patient when they are asking you for your expertise in it and your opinion as the expert in your field, that firsthand knowledge to be able to provide to them is invaluable. I can't tell you how many patients I had say to me, what do you think about these over-the-counter hearing aids? I have no thoughts because I haven't listened to them. So have you really listened to them? Have you taken the time? And, the majority of these have a return policy. So you can get them, wear them, return them, get your money back, but at least give yourself that experience to know what you're telling the patient is really, truly something that you've experienced yourself. And then take that knowledge and talk through patient misconceptions. So these are the things that we hear from patients all the time, the quotes that we've encountered. If I can hear better with AirPods, why should I pay more? They're just like hearing aids, right? Over the counter means I can fix my hearing on my own. So all of that's understandable from a patient perspective because they want easy solutions. They want things that aren't going to take up their time. And tech companies really market to convenience. That's really Apple's whole shtick, is being convenient, easy to use, and effective. But convenience does not equal clinical care, right? It's not, medical care is not always convenient, and the convenient route is not always the route you want to go. Because the truth really is that hearing loss is complex. We all know that. We live it every day. And while OTC devices and AirPods might offer some amplification, they're not tailored to a person's unique hearing profile. And just like somebody with, I've got blurry vision when I take my glasses off. I need to, but I need to have those. And in buying those and purchasing those, I'm desiring my vision to be back to 2020. It's not going to be 2020, right? And so how we position ourselves to present that information to patients is key. The biggest risk is delayed treatment. The biggest risk of patients accessing these over-the-counter devices and thinking that they are meeting their needs is delayed treatment. And they rely on this as a quick fix and can tend to extend it much longer than what they should. So those are the types of things that you need to talk to patients about. Is we want to make sure we stay on top of this. This is why we talk about having annual hearing evaluations, right? Bringing patients back. And then really addressing myth versus reality for these patients. Super important. One of the ways, I know I'm kind of running low on time here, so I'm going to run through this, but one of the ways that you can really present this information really well is through our VidScript journey. So I don't know how many of you are utilizing VidScript. If you're not, I highly, highly recommend it. But I'm going to play this short video, and this will show you, if you are on VidScript, this is one of the journeys that we have available that you can record. The exorbitant benefit of this is you are able to position your opinion and expertise and your practices expertise for your patients and provide them the education on this. So if you go to your VidScript journeys and scroll down, I think all the way at the bottom, you will see right there over-the-counter hearing aids. If you click on it, there are, I believe, 8 questions there that will give you prompts to provide this information to your patients. So what are over-the-counter hearing aids? What can they do? How do we, position their presence in our practice? And how do I actually feel about them? And you can answer all of those questions for your patients We can put that on your website, anything that you can do, and you can send this out to your patients. It's super helpful. And then they hear the information directly from you. So if you aren't on VidScript, if you have VidScript but haven't recorded this journey, I highly recommend you talk to your account manager. If you don't have an account manager and you would like to access this, please reach out to us. We'll have some contact information available in a follow-up email, and we can get you connected. So takeaways and homework. I want you to take the time to try out some of this technology, give it a first-person review, and develop an opinion about the options and features in these devices. If you are on VidScript or you want to access VidScript, please record your OTC VidScript journey to give the patients the information from you. They're desiring this expertise from you, and that is the greatest way that you can provide it for them. And then really just reframe your mindset to embrace the technology to open the door to educate your patients, educate other patients, the mass of patients that are experiencing this early hearing loss. So takeaways and homework there. And then that wraps me up. Next week, I know we're almost at time. Next week, we will be back with Google in our CQ Growth Lab. So please, if you haven't signed up for that, you can scan the QR code, and I'm going to grab questions really fast out of the Q&A. I apologize for running over. Does the marketing department have creatives that we can use in social media, email blast, etc.? Absolutely, we do. So I don't know if you mean specifically to OTCs and AirPods. I believe there is information out on the Market Source website. So as a member of CQ, you have access to the Market Source website through the MyCQ portal. If you log in and access that, there are tons of creatives available there that can be, there's social media infographics, there are patient letters, physician letters, there's tons of collateral there that you can access. If there's not something there that you would like, our marketing department would be more than happy to develop something. Any other questions? All right, just a reminder, we are at time. So just a reminder, this will be available and posted on the MyCQ website, as well as I believe we'll send an email out with a link to it afterwards if you want to share this with staff or any of your colleagues. So I thank everybody for attending. Thank you so very much, and we will see you all next week with Google.